You're listening to the Casting for Fun podcast, the show that talks about entertainment, sports, music, and inspirational stories for all to enjoy. We're glad that you could join us today. Please sit back, relax, and enjoy the show. Now, here is your host, Albert Pineda.
Welcome, everybody, to the Casting for Fun podcast. I am your host, Albert Pineda, and for this week's episode, in honor and in spirit of bringing in the new year for 2023, I wanted to take the opportunity to talk with my former manager at Space Bank Mini Storage, Mike Matthiessen. But there's a very particular reason why, because Mike has been a longtime volunteer for the Tournament of Roses parade and actually had the opportunity to serve as the president of the parade from 2015 to 2016, because every year there's a new president selected. So it was a wonderful experience for me to sit down with Mike to have a conversation about the Rose Parade, the rich history of the parade, the Rose Bowl game itself, because Mike is a huge fan of college football, and to talk about his experience serving as the president and getting to meet various grand marshals over the years. It's a really fun conversation for me, very interesting. It's one of the episode ideas that I had dating back to when I first started the podcast, but I wanted to save it specifically for the Rose Parade time frame, which is right now in January. So, it's a week later than what I was initially planning, but I'm very grateful and happy that Mike was able to give me the time tonight so we can reflect on the Rose Parade and everything it means for us as Angelenos, as, citizens of LA. We love the parade. We love the game, the Rose Bowl game, and it was really fun for me to talk to Mike about it. So here we go. This is my conversation with Mike Matthiessen about the Tournament of Roses. Joining me tonight on the Casting for Fun podcast is a very special, wonderful guest. He was the president of the Tournament of Roses from the years of 2015 to 2016 and was my manager for almost 20 years at Space Bank Mini Storage. It's Mike Matthiessen. Mike, how are you doing tonight?
Well, I'm doing very well. Thank you for having me.
Oh, thank you for coming on the podcast. And I hope you and Ann had a very Merry Christmas and Happy New Year.
Oh, we did. Thank you.
Oh, good. Good to hear. Good to hear. So as mentioned, you had the opportunity, I'm assuming was a wonderful, amazing experience for you to get to serve as the president of the Tournament of Roses for 2015 to 2016, which was the theme of Find Your Adventure, right?
Find Your Adventure it was.
Very good. Very good.
And adventure found.
Yes. Very good. Very good. But my understanding is the many years we've gotten to know each other for you serving as my manager at Space Bank Mini Storage, you've had much rich history with the parade. Was that correct?
That is.
Oh, okay. Very good. So I wanted to have you share with our listeners your experiences with the parade, the history, your memories, everything that comes associated with the parade, and of course the Rose Bowl game, which I know a lot of people are huge fans of.
Well, I know we have time constraints, so I could do a whole semester at college on all of this. Growing up in the Pasadena area, you get touched in so many different ways. And I'll just say that I started out as a very young child, a memory of watching the parade, and then selling tickets when I was in 8th grade. One of the people I babysat for operated one of the grandstands on the parade route. So I sold tickets, and later on, a friend of my father's was a float driver, and he needed an assistant. So in high school, I was an assistant driver, and then my dad and I were going to drive in the 1969 parade, and Dad got ill, so I drove, and I had a friend of mine as my observer. And it just kind of went on from there, little bits and pieces. I went away to college, came back. A good friend of mine's father worked for the Tournament of Roses, asked me if I wanted to join, which it hadn't given really any thought to. And I was honored. So I'll just say that, yes, I joined in 1979. 1980 was my first parade. And you join just, to do something for your community, to have fun with friends and doing something productive. And that was pretty much all there was to it. I didn't join to become president or even a chairman. It was just to do what you were asked and have fun with it.
So, going along that with those what you just described, Mike, what does the Rose Parade mean to you, and what level of excitement does it bring out in you when you get to see the floats as a spectator and as someone who actually gets to participate in putting the parade on?
Oh, Albert, it's I mean, what's really neat about the Rose Parade and a whole lot of other festivals, but I would say what's unique about the Rose Parade is just that it brings together not just Pasadena, but the whole surrounding Los Angeles County, Orange County, Ventura County, even, and it brings together a whole group of people to do one good thing, and that is bring enjoyment not just to our community but throughout the world, because our Rose Parade is an international event. It is seen internationally, not necessarily on our January 1st, but it brings in bands and floats and participants, and it is really America's New Year celebration, and that's a very special thing.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. As a kid, I mean, I would usually watch the parade on TV, and it was really fun just to see how intricate and how decorated they were. And then as a teenager, I always loved to just go check out the parade route on New Year's Eve, just to kind of see the festivities of people from all over the world coming to watch this thing, which was really cool and exciting. Going back to what you had mentioned before, Mike, about participating as part of, like, I guess, the committee or in the group, but not necessarily as president. I would imagine because there's so many people who are involved in the production of the Rose Parade, very few people ever actually get to be president, even though there's a president every year. Is that right?
Well, that's right. I mean, 935 is the prescribed maximum volunteers, and certainly not everybody is, but we're a meritocracy, and so everybody gets evaluated, but that's probably not the most fair thing to say either, because not everybody wants it.
Mhm.
Not everybody has the time for it. And even going back to you and I, at Space Bank, I went to my employers, our employers, and said, this is going to take a lot of time. And are you okay with this? Because if they said no, I take my job over Tournament of Roses, quite frankly.
Mhm.
And I, like I said, I didn't join to become president, and and I wasn't planning, and you're elected, and it's quite an honor. And I hope you edit this out.
Oh, very good. So can you walk us through the whole experience? So you're selected to be president, and then for the whole year, you're very much part of the planning process, where you're the head honcho. You're making major decisions. You're leading and guiding people. In fact, I remember at the time, technically, I wasn't working in the Pasadena office. I was in Ontario. But my understanding was you were gone very frequently, sometimes even for trips around the world to, I guess, interview or talk to different bands from around the world who would be participating. So if you could walk us through was that year like serving as president of the Tournament of Roses?
Well, I'll go back to when I was chairman of the Parade Operations Committee and directing the parade. And it was the year after that I was elected to be on the executive committee. So that was 2008.
Okay.
And so I knew that I was going to be president in 2016, 8 years ahead. And so during those 7 years before you become number one, when you start out on the executive committee as number eight, then you have, by the time you're number one, you have been the supervisor or coordinator of every committee in the Tournament of Roses. You have chaired all the business committees, and you've served on the Chamber of Commerce board, the foundation board, and game policy, and also game management. So there's a lot there's a lot before you ever become number one.
Mm.
So I'll go back to, when you are elected on the executive committee, you start looking forward to, okay, so what would a good theme be? Who would be a good grand marshal? And some of the other facets that come, because when you're tournament president, you have two jobs. One is selecting the grand marshal and selecting the theme, and then you let all the other committees do their jobs and get the heck out of the way.
Mm-hmm.
And so I knew that there was a lot of 50th anniversary of this, the 45th of that, 25th of this. But I also knew it was the 100th anniversary of the National Park Service. And the National Park Service actually reached out to me and said, we'd like to do something to celebrate our centennial. And we'd like to do that with the Tournament of Roses parade. And I'm not sure it was wisdom, Albert. I'll just say there was maybe dumb luck that just said, we're looking for branding, and we want to be more national, and let's just make the whole parade about the National Park Service. So we had never done that before, and I'm not so sure that we're ever going to do that again about any other service. But the 2016 parade was the opening centennial celebration of the National Park Service. And we had a whole lot of National Park Service elements, people involved, and it took a lot of years and working with them to try to do things, not just in the parade, but in deck places and post-parade and other aspects.
Oh, awesome. So you mentioned about the selection of the Grand Marshal, and I believe for your year, the documentary filmmaker Ken Burns was the Grand Marshal. Was that right?
Absolutely. I would say he was the best Grand Marshal we've ever had.
Oh, very good. Very good. So I guess
we were so lucky,
okay.
so fortunate. And I just, what a great person and representative. And he embraced the whole idea of the charity and the community and the coming together as no other person could.
I definitely want to come back to the Grand Marshals, but I want to finish up with your time as the president. So we get to the point where the big days arrived. It's January 1st of 2016. But if I remember hearing correctly, you had suffered or were battling the flu at the time. Was that correct?
Well, yeah, and I'm going to blame the royal court for giving me the flu, but that has nothing to do with anything. I mean, you have spent from the third Thursday in January of 2015, when you're installed as president, you are the representative of all of our organization and other organizations and sponsors. And so you visit every band, and you're doing fundraising and promoting for the bands. So those bands may be in Japan, or they may be in Mexico or Guatemala or East Coast, West Coast, Midwest, wherever. And so that's a lot of fun. It's a lot of responsibility. And you're also attending football game, items along with that, and other PR events. And so when it comes down to, how are you feeling on January 1st, it really doesn't matter.
Oh, okay. Yeah, you had to be on cloud nine for just having that experience of getting to do this. Something you love so much, the parade, but to actually be a huge part of it, right?
Correct.
So what do you remember most about that day then? I mean, did everything go smoothly according to the way you and your committee had planned it? Basically, what was your experience like on that day?
Well, the experience was that I was with a family and friends, and I just let the committees, as you should, do their job, and whether it was the way I would have done it or not really doesn't matter. It's just that's what makes the Tournament of Roses I think a special event. Yes, you get to have breakfast at Tournament House, and the royal court comes down in their gowns, and there's ceremonial things to go along with it. But I think that really the best thing was just being able to be in the parade, waving to friends, and having them wave back, and being on the field and watching Ken Burns do one of the best coin tosses I've ever seen.
And do you remember the feeling when you actually got to present the Leishman Trophy, which I believe it was named after one of the founders of the parade? Was that right?
Oh, yes. Leigh Leishman's father was one of the early people. And it was Leigh Leishman's father that came up with the idea of building the stadium. And then Leigh, certainly, carried the lantern, the mantle, and became president of the Tournament of Roses. And then later on in 1979, he was the Grand Marshal as the president that year. Arthur Welsh wanted to acknowledge, one of our founders and one of our great contributors to the organization.
So then you got to have that opportunity to present the trophy to the winning team that year, which was Stanford. I know it probably would have been maybe more meaningful had USC been involved and won the trophy, but I think nonetheless, must have been a really wonderful experience for you. For me, I was absolutely ecstatic when I got to flip through the channels and find you on ESPN News presenting the trophy. So do you remember much about that moment?
Well, absolutely, I do, because I mean, you're very euphoric, and David Shaw, Coach Shaw, was just such a nice person. But I'll also say that the place kicker for the Stanford Cardinal was the son of one of my friends from growing up, and so having Conrad Uckerpina being right behind me, with all the other players, well, anyway, that was a special moment as well. And I'll just throw another shout out, because Conrad's older brother Grant was also an Eagle Scout and was a banner carrier in the 2008 parade. So there's a Uckerpina connection with the Rose Parade, certainly.
I definitely recognize that name from the many calls that Bill has done to Space Bank wanting to talk to
Yes.
Robert Martin. Very good.
Well, he yes. I'm very happy to say that he's very good. I'm happy to. Well, all right. He got to Space Bank because of me.
Okay. So your time unfortunately comes to an end, but it does for everybody who gets to serve as the president. How are you involved in the Rose Parade now, or are you much involved as you once were before?
After you're president, you have one more year on executive committee, and you chair football, the Hall of Fame selection, and game policy committee. So it's a pretty busy year. Mm-hmm. So you think you're off the leash, but you're not. And then you rotate off of executive committee into a life director. So that's what I am now. But the next four life directors are still football committee members, and which I still am, and I'll probably have at least one more year on football committee. And then also life directors are used on our business committees. And I talked about the structure of our organization and the 34 operating committees, the business committees, and also our foundation. And past presidents are used in all of those committees in one form or another in the business and the foundation. So there's lots of opportunities, and I'll be a voting member of the board of directors until I pass.
Oh, okay. Well, that's good that you get to do what you love and get to see and be a part of the production of the parade up until the very end, which I hope doesn't come anytime soon.
Yeah, thank you.
I do want to touch a little bit more on your experiences meeting past grand marshals. That concept is just so interesting and incredible to me that so many people that I love and admire, you've actually gotten to shake hands with and talk on an everyday conversation like we're doing right now, such as George Lucas and Vin Scully. And I remember you mentioned before Vince Scully agreed for that particular year that he was the Grand Marshal. I guess he had turned down the parade multiple times, right? Can you share some of your favorite experiences meeting certain Grand Marshals over the years?
Well, I will not confirm or deny that Vin turned it down. We've had multiple people that have turned down invitations, and
Okay.
that's because of scheduling and just their own time commitments. And some people just aren't interested in doing parades and some of the things because we don't pay for grand marshals.
Mm-hmm.
So they have to really embrace, the whole charity and the community involvement, aspect of what we're doing. And yes, we've had grand marshals that have turned down and then finally accepted and or just turned down and never shown up. But we've had some grand marshals that have been more embracing. And I'll just say that, fun grand marshals. I mean, Angela Lansbury, I got to drive when I was on transportation
Oh, fun.
committee. How much fun. And she transcended generations because they were young and old because of her TV show and in Crab Apple Cove. So she, at any rate, I'll just say that was very fun to see that. Gerald Ford wanted to leave the football game, or did not want to leave. Sorry, Gerald Ford did not want to leave the football game early, and Secret Service was trying to get him out of there because they didn't want to have to rush him out, with the rest of the crowd after the end of the game. But he wanted to watch the game. Frank Sinatra. Frank Sinatra was just so embracive and and generous with his time, and that was great. I'll just say some of them that I've seen. Let me look at my notes here. Grand Marshals, Gregory Peck. Gregory Peck came in when a Grand Marshal had accepted and then suddenly took a movie deal, and we scrambled, and Gregory Peck came in at the very last minute and so gracious and probably one of our better, certainly, one of our better speakers.
Mm-hmm.
But I'll just say I'm going to go back to Ken Burns, because Ken Burns, I didn't think that I was going to be able to get Ken Burns. Because they have busy schedules. And when PBS said, we think we can get Ken Burns for you, it's like, oh, why not? I mean, he epitomizes everything of what we wanted to do and accomplish. And then he Albert, he understood this whole idea of what the tournament volunteers do, that it's like people that are cooking Thanksgiving dinner and they spend hours and hours cooking a dinner that's consumed in 30 or 60 minutes, or people that spend, an hour wrapping a Christmas present that gets ripped apart in 3 or 5 seconds. You've seen that with the kids. So, and yet that's what the Tournament of Roses does. We plan for a whole year for an event, that is only 2 hours long, and it's our gift, and just seeing, the people that come to say thank you, and the appreciation and the awe and the wonderment, whether it's kids or adults or older adults or whoever it is, that is just so heartwarming, and that's all we work for.
Oh, very wonderful. Very good. That's glad to hear. And yeah, I can attest that. I mean, as a young child, I got to watch a lot of Angela Lansbury Disney movies. So, I mean, I was a fan as well. So I know a lot of people probably, miss her dearly after she passed this past year. So I guess it's
Well,
wonderful that you had the opportunity to meet some of these great, wonderful individuals before they unfortunately are no longer with us, as we see that's the case. Did you also get to
It's
meet?
a weird feeling, Albert. It's a weird feeling hearing a voice, whether it's Keith Jackson or Vin Scully, and you're going, wow, you want to pinch yourself. It's like, this is something you hear over the airwaves. This is not standing next to me.
Mm-hmm. Very good. And did you happen to get to meet Brazilian soccer player Pele when he got to serve as the Grand Marshal?
Not personally. I saw him personally, but I did not meet him.
Oh, okay. Yeah, so throughout the rich history of the Rose Parade, we can see there's been so many unique personalities get to serve as Grand Marshal. So I'm always envious of you, Mike, that you've had that opportunity to rub elbows with some of the kindest, greatest people that there are.
Well, they are kind, and they're generous with their time, and our Rose Parade and our celebrations are very, very much appreciative.
I wanted to turn the conversation now to the Rose Bowl game itself, which again has been synonymous with the parade, but technically isn't quite as old. Is that right?
That's right. I'll tell you, the 1890 Rose Parade was put together by the Valley Hunt Club as a promotion for selling land in Pasadena. The 1880s, because even prior to that, the Intercontinental Railroad brought people to the West Coast, and then the railroad coming down from San Francisco to L.A. made L.A. a boom spot. Tuberculosis and other things were prominent at the time, unfortunately, and our dry, arid, clean air climate was very much sought after, and so people could get to Pasadena easier. Mm-hmm. And there was a Indiana, Michigan, Illinois colonies, mostly the Indiana people. We were grapes before. Indiana brought citrus, and we had more citrus growers in Pasadena because of its location, its water, the Arroyo Seco. And those things all brought people to the crown of the valley, which was Pasadena. So 1890, Valley Hunt Club says, well, we need to promote this because we're going to try and sell more land and bring people to the Raymond Hotel and the resort and buy land. And that's what it was. And the next year, they said, well, are we going to do this again? Yeah, okay, let's do it again. So they decorated their carriages, and Colorado Boulevard was the main, actually Colorado Street at the time, was the main thoroughfare, the only thoroughfare, and so they went down and they staged some after picnic things and frivolity and celebrated the New Year. Well, I'll tell you that even later years, they thought about not just doing this or not doing it on New Year's, but they thought about, well, let's do it, on Washington's birthday, or let's do it in February. But they stuck with the January 1st, fortunately. After a few years, it got to be too much for the Valley Hunt Club. I mean, they were just getting together, and 5 or 6 guys says, okay, this is what we're going to do. And so they started a separate organization, the Tournament of Roses Association, and that was about 1895. And don't quote me on all these dates. I only need to be 51% accurate. But at any rate, then it became more permanent. And then they needed more money because it started costing money to put this thing on. And in 1901, one of the new guys, a new member of the organization, actually a guy from Canada, and he said, hey, they're doing this thing in college football. Maybe we could get, 2 college football teams to play. And so at any rate, so they tried that in 1902. I'll just say, Albert, I could do a whole semester on this, on how college football was in turmoil at the time. But at any rate, they brought him out, and the game started late, and there were no rules, regulations. Stanford just got demolished. I mean, they had broken collarbones, broken legs, and they couldn't even field the whole team. They called the game at 49-0. But you know what? Michigan had not been scored on by anybody else either. So that wasn't unique. But that was the only football game because, like I said, I mean, football at the time, college football was in turmoil, and it was banned in Georgia. It was banned in the Cook County of Chicago. That people were maimed, and there were deaths, and there was no regulations. Teddy Roosevelt brought a group together, and the NCAA was founded, and Tournament of Roses tried other things in between. And even inspired by the Ben-Hur movie, not the Charlton Heston one, but the earlier Ben-Hur. We tried the chariot races, and we almost lost a president in one of those. But when the NCAA was formed, and there was, college football was brought back to respectability, then that's when we started, trying to do college football, postseason football again. And nobody else was doing that. I mean, we were erecting stands at Tournament Park, which is South Caltech, in their field down there. And we invited other schools from the East to come out to play the best school in the West. And like I said, they're going, you know what, students, I mean, with football teams, I mean, they were 12, 14 people max. And they're going, well, we want our Christmas holidays, and what's in it for us? And why should we come out to the West Coast? We got Brown to accept to come out for January 1st, 1916, and they played Washington State, and Washington State was the second best team because Cal and their advisors said, well, you know what, we're not going to participate in something that it's not collegiate. At any rate, that it poured rain. And the Tournament of Roses lost $11,000. In 1916, we lost $11,000. And the Tournament of Roses had members that are going, this is a stupid idea. We're not going to do this. We're not doing this again. We can't afford it. And in fact, there were 16,000 unsold tickets. I mean, that's how bad it was. So this guy, J.J. Mitchell, was the football chairman for the next year in 1916. And he invites University of Pennsylvania in October. They hadn't even played their whole season. He invites them. He says, would you guys come out on January 1st, 1917? And University of Pennsylvania said yes. And then we waited for the best of the West. And actually, Washington was better, but it was $250 cheaper to invite Oregon. So we invited Oregon just to save $250, and they came down. 25,000 people attended, and the game was a huge, huge success. And that's, quite frankly, that's when Lay Leishman's father started thinking, maybe a stadium would work, because we're erecting grandstands for 25,000 people. And how long is that going to last? And that's arduous as it is too. So that's where we go. That's why we're the granddaddy. We're the first to ever do postseason. And, once again, Albert, I could go on. I could do 7 or 8 different deals on postseason football, what the tournament went through. Ivy League drops out of postseason play. Big Ten would not do postseason play. We're fighting now. Other bowls are cropping up. We're fighting for other football teams to come play out here. And that's when, fortunately, right after World War II, we got the Big Ten Pac-12, which was it wasn't Big Ten Pac-12 then, but at any rate, that's the arrangement, the tri-party agreement.
Oh, very interesting. It's very fascinating to
Well,
learn.
you didn't fall asleep, so that's good.
No, no, no. I was very interested to learn all that, Mike. I mean, you look at today, college football just being the massive juggernaut it is for money and revenue and fan interest. Stadiums are always full. But I guess that wasn't always the case in the beginning part of the 20th century, which is always interesting to learn.
No, no, no. It was all about paying for the parade. Quite frankly, it is still all about paying for the parade. The
Mhm.
parade's free. We get no TV revenue from the parade whatsoever. So what pays for the parade is the revenue from the football game. That's our charity.
Oh, okay. Very good. Do you have any particular favorite games that you can remember? Because I know you're a huge fan of college football, particularly USC. So was there any particular Rose Bowl game that stands out to you as being particularly thrilling or exciting?
Well, first of all, Albert, I'd like to say I went to San Diego State, so I like to shout out to Don Coryell, our coach at the time, and our Aztecs. However, I am married to a Trojan, and so certainly we do follow the Trojans. That's a very tough question, Albert, because by the time I get to the football game, I've been up a lot of hours sometimes over the years. And you get up early, you're at the parade, and by the time you get to the game, I'm not so sure how coherent I really am. But we have been very, very fortunate in hosting some great, great games that have been seen, throughout the nation. And we've had some very, very high ratings. Even this year's ratings, as low as they were, because it wasn't really a great game and it was on Monday. But we're the highest rated bowl game other than a playoff game. And that just goes to show the draw of drawing from the whole nation, of teams. I mean, Ann doesn't want me to say this, but that Texas SC game, Vince Young, oh, is heartbreaking game. But we also had, it looked like a track meet, when Georgia and Oklahoma, I mean, they scored over 100 points, in the total game going up and down. The SC, you know, uh, upsetting Penn State. I mean, even going back to my first Rose Bowl game, which wasn't until I was in my 20s, and that was when UCLA upset the juggernaut of Ohio State and Woody Hayes at the time.
There's so many to choose from. It's really hard to pick. Like you said, like it just seems that every year there could be something interesting or fun that happens in the game itself. And I know for our mutual friends, Leslie and George, who go every year, I mean, they could probably give several examples of some of their favorite games as well. What I wanted to like, going back to what you had mentioned before about the game taking place on Monday. Obviously, that was the case because New Year's fell on a Sunday. So I always thought that was kind of an interesting rule that the Rose Parade uses. Why is it exactly that they don't host a parade on Sundays and wait to the second?
Well, this goes all the way back to the 1800s, Albert, when Colorado Street, before it was a boulevard, Colorado Street had every church, and we were pretty much settled by all the Midwesterners. And so, I couldn't tell you, there must be 20 churches on Colorado Street. And so if you had a parade going by on a Sunday, and well, there weren't 20 in the 1800s, but I mean, if you had bands and floats and people disrupting all the horses that were tethered outside the churches in the 1800s, that wouldn't be a good thing. So we made a pact with God, and we will not have our parade on Sunday, and you will not rain on our parade. Now, I'll just say that we've had a couple rains, but we've held up our end of the bargain.
Oh, okay, very good, very good. And if I remember correctly, or just from my research, the only year that the Rose Parade did not take place was 2021 because of COVID. Was that correct? I
We
could be mistaken. I
we
was looking to
we
see if there
didn't
was.
we didn't have the parade in on January 1st, 1942 either.
Oh, okay. I think well, I remember reading that the Rose Bowl game had been moved to
Right. They moved the
because
game to Durham,
yeah.
and that's a whole nother story. But yeah, there was no parade that year either.
Oh, okay, yeah. So I would imagine that with the bombings in Pearl Harbor that had taken place just a few weeks prior, the government probably mandated no mass gatherings on the West Coast. That would be
That's
my
correct.
assumption. Okay.
That's correct.
Well, that was pretty much all the talking points I had for about the parade. Was there or the game itself? Was there anything else that you wanted to bring up? Any rich history that I might have missed? I'm sure there's probably tons of things, but
There are. The thing about gosh, think about the game is that we have evolved, um, in trying to maintain tradition and yet try to stay up with the NCAA, the BCS, and now the CFP. And even lately, in our contract talks, we have a separate ESPN agreement with for our game. The other bowls have a collective ESPN agreement with the CFP, and so trying to meld all of this together, trying to make it all happen. We want to be good partners, and we just want to continue to be the best we can with America's and working with the universities and the colleges. When I mentioned earlier that we're not contractual with our partners, we are actually partners. And so our tri-party agreement is separate from other bowls where they partner with the ACC or the SEC or the Big Ten. So we're one third, one third, one third with Big Ten, Pac-12. So our decisions aren't just the Rose Bowl. So the Pac-12 and the Big Ten have just as much say in how we have been, negotiating with the CFP. Now we're going to have quarterfinals and semifinals, and so far we're going to be on January 1st at 2 o'clock. We'll see how that goes forward, but we want to be good neighbors, and we want to put on the best that we can. And I'll just go back to saying the other thing, Albert, is that our Rose Bowl is a big payout. And we have been giving back to the universities and the conferences, I don't know, close to $80 million a year. I
oh
mean,
wow.
that's a chunk.
Mm-hmm.
The Tournament of Roses is not getting, that money. We have our budget that is approved by our tri-party agreement, and the balance is going to our conference partners. So we've been able to contribute a whole lot of money to, the colleges and the conferences and higher education for a whole lot of years. We're very proud of that.
Oh, absolutely. That sounds very wonderful. That again, as you mentioned, you guys do so much for the community of Pasadena and LA County, and I'm assuming just all of Southern California. It's wonderful to see that, and then just to see the wonderful parade that gets put on, the wonderful sports game that we get to watch, everything involved around the Rose Parade and the Tournament of Roses. I think it's just fantastic. So again, thank you so much, Mike, for sharing your experiences with me. Did you have any other things to mention to bring up?
Well, I would just say that our financial impact to, as I mentioned, just not just LA County,
Uh-huh.
but it's not just the tournament volunteers. It's the people that are building the floats and the band boosters that are raising the money to bring their bands here, and the equestrian people that are, bringing their horses and finding places to stay because we're not paying for all those things. There's a whole lot of people that are paying a whole lot of money out of their pockets in order to participate.
Well, if there's nothing else for tonight, Mike, thank you so much for sharing your time with me. I learned some new things about the parade. And again, I'm always fascinated just to learn more about it because it's fun. It's just a great time of the year to celebrate. And there's so many great things to see in the area. If you wanted to walk around Old Town Pasadena after the Rose Bowl game, you can usually run into some interesting people.
Yeah.
Mike, thank you so much for sharing your time with me tonight. And I definitely would love to get you back on my podcast again to talk about other common interests that we share, such as the Dodgers. I think that'd be really fun.
Well, if you have any other questions, Albert, and need another podcast to go over some of the other items that we didn't talk about, I'm available. Thank you.
Oh, okay. Well, thank you so much, Mike. Okay, you've been listening to the Casting for Fun podcast. Thanks, everybody.